On a rainy evening in June of 2023, I drove 5 hours west from Chicago to a secluded rental cabin on the edge of Shawnee National Forest, southern Illinois, hoping a long weekend off-grid would clear my burnout haze. The place sat at the end of a clay logging road, a one-room structure built in the 1930s, advertised as authentically rustic, no cell reception, solar lanterns provided. And although the porch sagged and ivy pulsed on every wall, I felt relief when the tires finally stopped spinning in mud, and the woods swallowed my engine noise, leaving only cicadas rasping against the hush of distant thunder. Inside smelled of cedar and damp wool. There was a cast-iron stove, a clawfoot tub fed by a rain cistern, and, centered on the rear wall opposite the single bed, a large square window pane, set into an ornate wooden frame so polished the glass looked black until my lantern light found it. I unpacked, brewed instant coffee on the propane burner, and watched dusk bleed through trees. That was when I noticed the window wasn't showing the forest behind the cabin at all, but another room mirroring the one I stood in. Like a silent film set, identical stove, same quilt, same lantern on a trunk, everything reversed left to right. Assuming clever interior design, I pressed my palm against the pane, expecting cool glass. Instead, I met lukewarm resistance, as if touching still water. The mirror room lantern flickered at my contact, though my own flame remained steady. Unease pricked, yet curiosity overrode. Maybe two cabins shared a double-paned window? I stepped outside, circled to the back. There was no window, only solid log wall, slick with lichen. Storm clouds rolled, so I chalked it up to old glass reflection quirks and settled for the night. While reading by lantern, I sensed movement at the edge of the pane. Glancing up, I saw myself seated inversely, but the other me raised a hand a moment before I did, as if leading instead of mirroring. I froze. The reflection smiled faintly, something I hadn't done. My lantern guttered, and in that flutter, the other room light flared bright enough to cast shadows in my cabin, shadows of furniture that didn't exist on my side. I snapped the book shut and covered the window with a wool blanket secured by tacks found in a drawer, reassuring myself the isolation and caffeine played tricks. Rain began drumming the tin roof in sheets, masking every forest sound. Eventually, fatigue pinned me to the mattress. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to oily lantern light seeping around the blanket's edges, glowing in pulses like a heartbeat. The cabin air smelled of warm pennies. The blanket billowed, though no breeze moved inside. I sat up. As I did, a metallic scrape echoed beneath the floorboards, traveling toward the wall with the window. My phone lay dead despite being on airplane mode, battery at 0. The lantern, turned down before sleep, now burned high, wicks smoking. I mustered courage, peeled back one corner of the blanket. The other room stood dark, except for an open trapdoor in its floor that hadn't existed earlier, pitch descending into deeper black. Just above the opening floated a cluster of moths banging the glass, their wings dusting soot-like scales that stuck to my side of the pane. Then a hand, paler than mine, nails grey, emerged from below the trap and slapped the inner surface, leaving a wet palm print directly opposite my face. I staggered, dropping the blanket. The lantern hissed out, plunging me into storm-soaked darkness, lit only by muted lightning outside. In that strobe, I saw the outline of the trapdoor mirrored on my floorboards, flush where no seam had been. Water dripped upward from it, vanishing into the ceiling. I bolted for the porch, but the front door stuck, as if nailed. Panic soared. From behind came the thump of the mirror trap opening wider and the squeal of wood under weight. I remembered the cast-iron stove, heavy, immovable. With trembling hands, I heaved it inch by inch, sparks flying from ash pan, until it blocked the window frame entirely. Iron met glass with a muffled clunk, sealing whatever tried to push through. Rain softened to drizzle, and dawn's first slate glow seeped through east-facing chinks. At sunrise, I inspected. The blanket lay shredded, its wool fibers wet with reddish stains. The stove bore a handprint in rust the size of a child's, though the fingers were too long. I packed in minutes, hauled gear to the car, and found fresh mud handprints across the hood, angled upward as if someone had climbed from below the engine bay. The road out was half-washed, but adrenaline punched the accelerator until pavement greeted me miles later. Cellular bars sprang up, the phone, dead all night, rebooted at 93%. Back in Chicago, I emailed the rental owner. Her reply chilled marrow. She swore the property burned in 1987 and no cabins stand there now, only foundation stones. County records proved her right. Satellite images showed a charred clearing. My photos from the trip stored nothing but black frames stamped with timestamps coinciding to each lightning flash. And in the last image, faintly illuminated, is my cabin interior. Except I'm absent from the bed, and the window displays not a room but dense forest at noon, sunlight spilling through, while a small, too long hand reaches across the sill toward where my pillow should be. As thunderstorms rolled across the Adirondack high peaks on the night of August 5, 2022, I arrived with 3 co-workers at a remote rental cabin near Keene Valley, an off-grid A-frame perched where John's brook thins to a whisper. Eager for a long weekend of trail work and stargazing, yet by sunrise only 2 of us remained willing to stay after an attic lantern began tallying our breaths like debts coming due. The structure looked postcard warm from the outside. Cedar shakes, steep roof, wood smoke chimney. But the interior carried a colder scent, resin mixed with old iron. Our first job was lighting the Franklin stove, so I climbed the loft ladder for extra firewood. Wedged among rafters, I found an antique railroad lantern hanging from a bent nail, ruby glass intact, wick blackened. A small brass plate on its cap read, "Property of Ad Rescue Kona 5, and beneath, in smaller font, "Breaths Ode." I assumed it a kitschy decor prop and hauled an armload of pine downstairs. While we cooked dinner, the storm hammered, windows shuddered, and conversation turned to the lantern. Max, gearhead of the group, swore railroad lanterns never belonged to Adirondack rescue outfits, but Addy, the historian, argued local rangers once repurposed rail gear during 1920s searches. To settle it, I fetched the lantern, intending to examine markings. The air in the loft felt viscous, every breath damp. As I unclipped the lantern, it emitted a faint clink, like a tally counter advancing. Wick long dead, yet the globe glowed dull red. Downstairs light dimmed when I set it on the table. Our solar battery read full, but LEDs flickered as the lantern brightened. Addy tapped the glass inside. Faint numbers etched themselves into soot. 0005. She joked we'd discovered an escape room prop. The storm eased, tension melted, music played. After 3 beers, I noticed the digits had advanced to 0020, though none of us touched it. At midnight, with the generator off, we settled into our bunks. The lantern rested on the hearth, its glow extinguished. The rain lulled me until a metallic tick echoed, a single note bouncing off the beams. Through half-open eyes, I saw the ruby glow pulse, digits climbing, 45, 46. Each change synced with Max's sleep-heavy exhale from the bunk opposite. It seemed as though the lantern was counting breaths. I timed it, whispering numbers. At 60 breaths, the lantern chimed, a sound like steel wheels clashing far away. The digits reset to 0, the globe flared, and Max jerked awake, choking, clutching his chest like the wind had been knocked out of him. He brushed it off as just a nightmare. Morning came, sodden and grey. Max complained of tight lungs. The lantern sat cold, digits blank. We hiked to the Basin Mountain trailhead for work. Max lagged behind, wheezing, despite a clean bill of health just weeks before. Clouds pressed low and thunder growled early. We aborted the summit push. Back at the cabin by afternoon, Max crashed on the sofa, his pulse fluttery. Addy suggested an ER run, but he refused, blaming the altitude. While we were debating, I noticed the lantern was back on the hearth. The globe faintly amber, digits already at 12, even though no one was breathing nearby. Unease gnawed at me. I carried it outside, intending to leave it on the stump 30 yards down the trail. Each step felt heavier, the air thick, like wading into sand. Droplets fogged the glass from the inside, obscuring the numbers. I set it down and returned. 10 minutes later, thunder cracked and the lights failed. In the gloom, the lantern now glowed atop the hearth again, wet pine needles stuck to its base, digits spinning upward fast. 190, 200. Max's breathing slowed dangerously with each increment. We called 911, but cell bars were absent. Addy attempted CPR while I smashed the lantern glass with a poker. Iron crumpled like warm wax, but the globe remained whole, numbers blurring past 0250. The room chilled, every exhale misted. My own breaths synced to the counter after Max passed out. Each inhalation pulled the digits higher. The lantern chimed like a rail clank at 0300. Max convulsed once, then lay still. The counter reset to 0000 and the glow dimmed. The cabin air warmed a fraction. Max had no pulse. Addie and I dragged him into the jeep, fishtailed down the muddy track toward the Keene Valley Clinic. Half a mile out, headlights carved through the fog. Suddenly the ruby lantern flickered in the rear view, hanging from the roll bar though we hadn't packed it. Digits racing, 0025. My chest tightened. Breath became shallow. Addie gasped too, both of us draining while the counter climbed. I skidded to a stop, grabbed the lantern and flung it into the marsh. It disappeared without a splash, the glow sinking like an ember into the peat. Instantly our lungs cleared. We sped to the clinic. Max was pronounced dead on arrival, suspected sudden cardiac arrest. The sheriff hiked in the next day and found no lantern at the cabin, only a scorched circle on the hearth. Wood peeled outward like it burst from an internal blast. Under the ash lay a bent brass plate. Breaths owed 0003. They ruled it lightning damage. The coroner was puzzled. Max's lungs were devoid of fluid, but the alveoli were collapsed as though vacuums sucked. 2 weeks later, my fitness tracker glitches nightly at 12 a.m., registering breaths I never took. Count stops at 120, same as my average daily total. A package arrived with no return label. Inside, a pristine ruby lantern globe digits etched 0002. Another thunderstorm starts tonight. I keep doors locked, jeep fueled. Yet the air already tastes like metal rails cooling after a long, steep descent. And each inhale feels tallied by something patient enough to collect every breath promised to it, until its tally rings 13-hour intervals and resets on whoever's next closest to the glow. On the sticky night of July 14th, 2021, while volunteering as a caretaker for an aging forestry professor's lakeside retreat in northern Minnesota's Boundary Waters, I discovered a dry well hidden beneath the cabin floor, an opening that should have led to black earth, yet revealed only starlight spinning beneath my boots. And the moment I peered in, it began showing me impossible reflections that bled into reality until the timber walls shivered like wet bark, and every exit hinged on a single choice I still regret. The professor's cabin was perched on a granite bluff above Burntside Lake, only reachable by canoe and a mile of boardwalk through tamarack bog. He paid me to catalogue lichens while he lectured overseas. The structure dated back to 1890, sturdy but musty. On my first evening, I noticed a faint seam in the pine plank floor. 6 boards near the hearth, cut cleaner than the rest, forming a perfect hexagon with a rusted ring in its center. I chalked it up to an old root cellar hatch and forgot about it until midnight brought a heat-burst thunderstorm that rattled the panes and puffed wood smoke back through the chimney. Seeking dry air, I pried up the hatch with my multi-tool, expecting to find dank storage. Instead, my headlamp revealed a circular shaft, about 3 feet wide, and descending maybe 15 feet before vanishing. Not into darkness, but into a faint silver glow like moonlit water. There was no ladder, no stone lining, just smooth carved cedar walls, as if the tree itself had grown hollow. A rope hook dangled, yet nothing hung there. The glow, it intrigued me. I lowered my phone with its flashlight app, camera recording. At about 10 feet, the beam dimmed and the screen showed only static. Then a frame of crystal clear starscape, identical to the one outside the storm clouds, appeared. When I raised the phone, 2 minutes of footage displayed my cabin interior shot from overhead, perspective impossible from the shaft depth, with me kneeling at the lip, yet staring down, empty-eyed, arms limp. The timestamp looped the same 4 seconds. A pressure swelled in my ears like diving deep too fast, and the cedar walls exhaled a resin scent sweet enough to gag. I sealed the hatch and barricaded it with a trunk of geology texts. But sleep never came. The storm passed, yet distant booms echoed under the floor as if thunder walked bottomless corridors. Morning sun and rational thought convinced me the glow was phosphorescent fungus common in dead cedar, and the footage corruption a glitch. I portaged my canoe for water samples, returning at dusk to find the trunk shoved aside, hatch ajar 2 inches, pine needles scattered across rug though windows stayed latched. I forced the trunk back, hammered nails through ring and boards, and retreated to the porch with coffee until crickets lulled. Just after 2 a.m., a resonant scraping arose, the nails wrenching free one by one, each pinging floorboards like sleet. I froze. The professor's old wind-up alarm clock ticked 3 beats fast, then reversed. The hatch swung wide. From the mouth rose a coil of cool vapor that smelled of lake algae. It unfurled toward the rafters, condensing into faint silhouettes of birch trunks bending under load. Inside the shaft, the silver glow resolved into moving images, me, seated at the canoe dock earlier, but my reflection lifted its face and stared directly up as though sensing I watched now, gesture beckoning downward. Suddenly every lantern in the cabin flared, spilling light so bright the vapor silhouettes cast crisp shadows across the ceiling. Shadows of people kneeling in prayer, though no bodies made them. The wooden walls trembled. Between planks, water wept and beaded on my gear. Instinct overrode science. I hurled a full 5-gallon water jug into the shaft. It vanished soundlessly. The glow dimmed, silhouettes flickered out, and the boards slammed shut hard enough to rattle window latches. Silence collapsed, broken only by wind sighing through spruce. The clock resumed normal cadence. I spent the rest of the night on the porch, axe in hand, until sunrise bruised the horizon. At daylight I paddled to the nearest ranger station, but staff were days out on fire watch. Only a radio tech remained. My tale earned raised eyebrows, yet he offered a pressure sensor and rope ladder. We returned by noon. The humidity felt wrong, air thicker, cooler, lake glass still. Inside the hatch lay closed, but the rope ring gleamed, scrubbed clean. We bolted the ladder to joists and dropped it. Our headlamps cut only 16 feet before beams swallowed. The sensor read negative 4.9 pounds, then error. The tech backed away, muttering about magnetic flux. As he packed, his radio squelched, an open carrier wave crackled, a looping recording of our just-spoken words delayed by 8 seconds. Then a new voice joined, low and fluid, reciting my childhood address. Static spiked, unit died. He fled to the canoe, promising to file a report. I stayed, compelled to finish my logbook entry, even as the hatch lid began vibrating like a drumhead. At twilight, alone again, the lid lifted slowly. Instead of shaft, I saw Burntside Lake as from high aerial view, water rippled by non-existent wind. On its mirrored surface glided a canoe, my canoe, empty but for the 5-gallon jug upright in its bow. The canoe beached on unseen shore, tipped, jug rolling into dark. A hand, desiccated yet webbed with algae strands, lifted from water, grasping gunwale. The floor under me creaked as if echoing that hand's weight. I slammed the hatch, but my palm met nothing. No solid boards, just lake-cold surface drawing me forward. I imagined falling through this impossible window into a night that never ended, where every reflection demanded to trade places. I retreated, shoving the stove atop the aperture, then hacked cedar boards from a woodpile and screwed them across in a frantic coffin pattern. I paddled out at first light, leaving the professor voicemail about rotten subfloor hazards. News never covered sinkholes or collapses at his property, but 6 weeks later, he emailed to ask why a rusted canoe had drifted onto his cove, hull stamped with my initials, yet bone dry inside except for a lone 5-gallon jug. He attached a photo in the jug's cloudy plastic, floated nails bent into vague letters that spelled "Come Home." I moved apartments that month, but every house since develops a faint cedar scent after rain, and occasionally the bathroom mirror fogs to reveal a reversed aerial view of some lonely northern lake with a cabin too small to see, until silver light ripples outward and the image leans toward me like a door slowly pushed from the other side. Cabins promise quiet, but the walls, the windows, and the wells remember louder things. If these stories made you hesitate before your next getaway, like share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because some doors stay closed only until they know you're listening.